We jump over to the New World this week with Pocahontas, and with her we delve into a world of ethics and politics surrounding the world of historical adaptation. Elephant in the room. Pocahontas was a real person. The first real person in the Disney Princess franchise. So I can't really deal in hypotheticals about her life because she has a historical lifetime and we know what she did and what happened to her. Second elephant. The Pocahontas of history is very different from the Pocahontas of the Disney movie, if you didn't already know that. There are lots of issues to talk about here. What creative license does a team of artists have with history? What counts as an homage to that person and what counts as just downright disrespectful to that person and their culture? This was actually the subject of my work early in 2017 when I studied the historicity of Joan of Arc adaptations, and I would love to explore it more with Pocahontas. But I think I'm going to save Disney adaptation ethics for another time because I think it's a big enough discussion to merit its own episode. In previous episodes I've altered history to fit the princess, so I'm going to do that in this one as well. Disney's Pocahontas exists in this Disney alternate universe with all the other princesses, and in this one she's mysteriously older. But since this is just an exercise in creativity to see what adult Pocahontas would be like, I've included some links below that were really helpful to me in learning about Pocahontas' real life, so I encourage you to check them out, especially the documentary. Where's this chick from? Pocahontas is the daughter of Powhatan, who was the main chief of a conglomeration of about 30 tribes in the Virginia area. The tribes are known collectively as the Senecomica, and they cover about 10,000 square miles. And the opening song of the film Pocahontas times the action at 1607 through 1608. Arguably the easiest timing and placement of all of the princesses so far. Pocahontas' kingdom. Within the 30 tribes there are about 15,000 people, and each tribe has their own individual chief, but all the chiefs report to Powhatan and they give him tribute. The territory's rivers provide the route along which the tribes can trade, share information, and rally to war. The power was divided among sub-chiefs and priests, but Powhatan was allowed to take supremacy in acts of diplomacy, and his brother was commander in all matters of war. 1607 puts Pocahontas' dad at the top of his game in terms of resources and popularity. Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. The English attacked. The English settled there. The Virginia Company arrives in 1607 and picks a really bad, swampy piece of land to build the first Jamestown settlement. Colonists die of malaria and dysentery real fast, and they fail to grow enough crops to sustain the colony. Pocahontas as the chief's daughter. Okay, so this is where Disney alternate universe ship kicks in, because in real life, Pocahontas didn't really stand to inherit any royal title. The Senecomica's chieftainship was passed on through siblings, so Powhatan's sisters and brothers would have received it before Pocahontas. The film Pocahontas seems to alter that history, making Pocahontas his only daughter, and he's kind of grooming her to take a leadership position.
You are the daughter of the chief. It is time to take your place among our people.
She's the primary ambassador between the Senecomica and the English, because the leaves have magically granted her the mastery of the English language. And presumably her entreaties to her father convince him to help the settlers through the starving time. However, Pocahontas 2 gives me the sense that despite her best efforts, tensions are still running high, and both factions still seem poised on the brink of the Anglo-Powhatan Wars. Historically, these wars were started by Lord de la Warr, but in the film they are instigated by Radcliffe, and Pocahontas has to step forward as a diplomat aiming to bring peace between the two factions. Let's see how she do. Diplomacy. Diplomacy is Pocahontas' middle name. Her defining personality trait in both films is a desire to communicate and understand.
But maybe we should try talking to them.
They do not want to talk.
But if one of them did want to talk, you would listen to him, wouldn't you?
Pocahontas.
Wouldn't you?
She's always the first to suggest a negotiation, she puts her life on the line to make that point, and she's the first to volunteer to go talk with potentially hostile leaders in parts unknown. And her interactions with King James and Queen Anne show grace under pressure and adaptability, which ultimately stopped the first volley of the Anglo-Powhatan Wars. Homegirl even gives up her first love and a life of adventure out of responsibility to her people. She chooses to marry a diplomat and maintain the peace. She is so willing to go the extra mile to reach an understanding that I think she would be an excellent successor to her father and keep the peace between the Senecomica and the English. In fact, the only way she wouldn't be successful is if the English were a bunch of racist, conquest-hungry, ruthlessly ambitious jerks. I'm giving her 20 out of 20. Optics. I imagine her popularity with her people would be a little diminished after that stunt she pulled at the end of the first film. They might not be down with acceptance the way she is. And you know, they have a right to be suspicious. Furthermore, she definitely has some level of acclaim with the colonists, but she isn't white, and the Senecomica aren't recognized by the English as an advanced civilization. So they're likely to look down on her too. Her eventual marriage to John Rolfe would, I think, calm some of the sparks on the English side, but in the end, I think the thing that makes Pocahontas so pure-heartedly cool is the thing that people wouldn't like about her. Her tribe would want her to stop being so darn forgiving to the English, and then the English would want her to conveniently tell them all the information she has and make her convert to Christianity. 3 out of 10. Economics. So the Senecomica are a trade-based society, so it's hard to be poor, necessarily. There's not a treasury to speak of. The economy is in flux from year to year depending on the resources available. Pocahontas will eventually be head of all 30 tribes and all of their resources, and if she's the primary communicator between the English and the tribes, she will be able to dictate how many, if any, resources the English get. As long as Pocahontas isn't too generous and just keeps giving it away for free, she could establish some very cool trade and get the tribes some items that they've never had before. She also needs to hide how much she has at her disposal so the English don't demand more than they're already asking for. Since she's not an economic peril, I'll give her 15 out of 20. But she loses the last 5 because she gave the settlers some free food at the end of the first film, and I think she's gonna do it again. Influence. As long as Powhatan's alive, it's hit or miss. He has his own council to guide him, and Pocahontas had to resort to pretty drastic measures to get his attention. But once she's in the chief's seat, she calls the shots. She just has to be careful not to step too far out of line because all 30 tribes already have their own individual chiefs, and if they don't agree with what she's doing, they could break off from the Confederacy or they could go to war against her. 7 out of 10. Conflict management. The English are going to be the biggest issue going forward because even though one Anglo-Powhatan war was avoided, that doesn't mean the other 2 will be. This puts Pocahontas ahead of her historical self because she died in 1617. If Pocahontas in this universe is still alive and she took over for her father after his death in 1618, then she's around 30, flirty, and thriving and married to John Rolfe on the eve of the Second Anglo-Powhatan War. Pocahontas' uncle attacked the settlers in 1622 in the hopes that the attack would be enough to force them to leave, but the English allied with some other tribes and retaliated. When her uncle tried to call for peace, the English planned to arrive under the guise of agreement and then poison everyone who attended. And this actually happened in real life. But if Pocahontas was alive and she did go to that meeting, I don't know. I think that the colonists would think twice about poisoning her because she was the chief who saved John Smith's life and she was an honored guest at the court of King James. If she also brings her English husband to the meeting, that would definitely cause them further pause. But as the colonies grow, the English attack smaller tribes and force their way inland. It's important to look at the bottom line here. Both factions don't want to share the land. The Senecomica want the needy visitors gone, and the English just want more of everything, and they don't want anyone to stand in their way. At some point, Pocahontas is going to have to make a choice. Be a diplomat or organize a defense. It happened in history, and I think it would happen to her. One good chief is not enough to stop a huge army with an onslaught of gunpowder and artillery and swords. Even if Pocahontas could maintain her tribe's land until her death, the Senecomica would likely disintegrate after her death. And the same result's gonna happen. 10 out of 40. Leaving Pocahontas with a score of 55 out of 100. She is a woman with a glorious heart and even more glorious hair. But sometimes you are faced with an unstoppable force, be it an unruly peasant class, or a plague, or some colonists. There's just nothing you can do. Seriously, do check out the links below. I highly recommend them, and I will see you next time.